Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abi.
That's me.
That's you.
And you. You guys, this is one of my favorite times of year. Justin is adorable and making me giggle, but
You're not wrong.
you're not wrong. But this is
Before we started the recording, there was a 5-minute discussion over how cute Justin is between Pietze and Abi.
And
He does have this like really cute side to him that's so endearing.
and then he knows when he's being cute, and he looks like he like reverts to like a 5-year-old little boy.
and that's when I strike and try to get away with murder.
Anyway, this is one of my favorite times of year, mostly because it's like a fun hangout with me and you and Jonny and Pietze, getting to talk life and getting to share about the journey that we've been on. I think we all, if you guys have listened to our podcast, you know that me and Pietze, I've been on the emotional health journey since I was like very young. My dad was a counselor, so I grew up around counseling. And then I started seeing a counselor. My mom was like, "We're screwing you up. Go see a counselor. Hopefully they'll help."
Best thing she did. One of the best things she did.
That was very kind of her.
The counselors
I
needed
think
a
so.
counselor. That would be us
very
with our
true.
kids.
That's
That's
very
actually
true.
probably very true. That's the only
Totally.
downside of that part.
Yep. But we really went on a journey of learning our body and our brain and the science and how to understand our triggers and how to regulate and how to heal pain. And one of the things that we recognized that we teach on, so we created a course. We went on this deep dive, both of us, and created a course. Basically, the concept is that when things come up, it's trying to call you into healing and freedom. So the pain in our life that is coming up it wants to drive us towards reconciliation with ourselves, reconciliation with our past, reconciliation with love. But if you don't know that that's what's happening in your body and your brain and your nervous system, you can just get stuck in that pain trigger cycle, and you can never actually feel that pull into love, that pull into wholeness. We called it the pathway to freedom, because it's actually our pain or our triggers or our fears or our nervous system is honestly is meant to be the pathway to the thing that sets us free the most. And this way it's a really empowering course, because it's basically like learn how to take the things that feel out of control in your life and use that as fuel to propel you towards who you want to become.
Yes.
Like, you don't have to be crippled by the way your emotions work. Like, for years, I was crippled by my emotions and crippled by my feelings and my reactions and my responses. And I've had to learn how to work with my emotions in my body instead of against them. And that's been really powerful for me. So we created this course, The Pathway to Freedom, and it is the main course. It's a prerequisite we have a year-long school that we run.
Yeah, Life Consulting Masterclass.
And we've had hundreds of people go through it. And we love getting to watch it because people's whole lives transform in a year.
Yeah.
Like, their entire view of themselves, their family, their past, their present, their future. There begins to be change that starts to affect them and ripples out into their lives. We have so many family reconciliation stories from it. And then people are being equipped with something they can do for a business. If you want to help people, you need to go on a journey yourself. Like Pietze and Jonny share so much. They are life consultants. Why? Because they went on a journey. So they actually know the emotional roadmap of their hearts and their minds and their bodies. And so they can help you learn your roadmap yourself. You only learn if you go through your own process. So we have a school where we help people do that. And we think the pathway to freedom is the most important foundation for that course. And so because of that, everybody who goes through our school has to go through the pathway to freedom.
So if you sign up for the Pathway to Freedom and you are wanting to apply to our school and you get into our school, we'll apply the cost of the Pathway to Freedom to the tuition of the school.
Yeah, so you get it for free.
Yeah. Sign up for the Pathway to Freedom is happening now on justinandabby.com, and applications for the Life Consulting Masterclass. You can apply for the Masterclass before you take it, and you can go ahead and take the Pathway to Freedom. And then if you get in, there is a very limited number of seats that we allow in the year-long
school.
Because we're very deliberate about cultivating the culture inside of that and wanting to know that people are in the right frame of mind in their life to be participating in there. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention, people have been asking us, what's it practically like to be an LCMC? And so recently we did a mini conference on validation. And in one of our sessions, we had some incredible encounters, and there was a lot of wonderful information that was deposited. And we thought, hey, you know what? We're going to make this specific session available for free for anyone who wants to get a deeper feeling for what LCMC is. You can click on the link in the description of this episode, and you'll be able to get that session for free. And if you're having any problems with that, you can also email us at yesplease@stumblconsulting.com, and we will send you a link to that episode, and you can watch it, have your own personal experience with it, and get some profound information out of our validation session from that mini conference.
Let's start, shall we?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
We're talking today
Let's do
about
this thing.
having a regulated family, and the journey of recognizing how you have power in that. And I just want to bring this up because whether you have kids or not, this has been one of the key shifts in how I view myself, has been recognizing the dysregulation in my childhood and recognizing that almost every emotional cycle I have goes back to me as a kid needing an adult to help me regulate. Like if I would have had, like most every healing encounter, I go back to my childhood and then I need to bring in an adult who can help me regulate.
Can you
and
just describe regulation real quick, by the way?
Yeah,
That's a good idea.
that's great. So when I think about being regulated, it is the place of, do you want to describe it, Pietze?
Yeah. So all of us have a nervous system. And that nervous system is basically the temperature gauge for how we feel internally. And so a lot of times when we are going through life, our nervous system is trying to understand what about this situation is safe and what about the situation is dangerous.
Yes.
Now, a lot of us can have a high threat response because of pain from the past or trauma that we've been through.
Yeah.
And when that pain and trauma starts to create ruts in our brain and in our body, because we're perceiving everything, even through our nervous system, through our body, even through our sensory receptors, it regulates, it can either regulate our system or dysregulate it. And basically what happens is as our body is perceiving all of this, it tells a story to our brain about the situation in front of us. And so let's say like, I am going into public speaking and I start getting anxiety. That's a dysregulated state. The trigger is public speaking. The state of being is...
Or the trigger could be shame from something in childhood. Or, it could be any number of things that trigger the dysregulation.
And then it puts you into dysregulated state. Now, some of us, when you experience trauma after trauma for long periods of time or high stress for long periods of time, it can keep you in a dysregulated state. And when you're in a dysregulated state, you are not in control of your emotions. That nervous system is telling you a story through your threat response about how scary the situation is in front of you when really it probably isn't. And so being dysregulated is being in a heightened state of emotion or a low state of emotion. Like depression would be the low side of it.
Yeah, numb would be a low state. Dysregulated doesn't necessarily mean you have huge emotions, because you could be numb and that would be a dysregulated state. So
absolutely,
we all have a window of tolerance. These are terms. And you are either in hyper arousal or hypo arousal, which means you either go into fight or flight, freeze or fawn. And basically regulation is our ability to stay in a place where we can have a reaction if there is a threat, and we can come back down to being calm and curious and being more attached to safety than threat.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about like a kid being dysregulated, they could be crying, or they could be having anxiety, or they could be throwing a tantrum, acting out, not listening. And so,
or they could just be disconnected.
Yeah.
In their own shut world. Down.
Mm-hmm.
Which is like the lower end of it as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I was watching.
And when they're regulated, they're calm, they're focused, they're listening.
They can be curious.
They're in the present moment. They're curious. They're able to keep their attention and their focus on what's happening in front of them.
And they can be relational.
They can be relational. That's where your relational circuits are on. It's that window of tolerance is in the middle. So, Abby talked about, your nervous system and your arousal state can go high or it can get low. And regulation is really in the middle of those two, where you feel regulated, you feel present, you feel safe, you feel connected.
And regulated doesn't mean you don't have emotions. It just means that you can come back to safety easily. So like you might have a spike of anxiety, but then you can come back to safety, or you might have a low of numb, but then you can come back to safety where you can get online again. Yes. So being regulated is online. So if you're like a great example, there's so many ways you can co-regulate. But I'll just give an example. If you're a kid and you're crying and your mom hugs you and you feel safe, and maybe you just feel her breath while she's hugging you, and your body can actually co-regulate. So if you feel someone else's, like their chest rising and falling, or you feel their heartbeat, or you feel the stableness inside their body, your body,
their
your
peace,
nervous
they're
system,
calm.
Your nervous system will actually match that. So kids don't know how to regulate. Their brains are not formed. They don't know how to regulate their own emotions as they're growing up. They don't have that skill set.
It comes online slowly. Mm-hmm. Slowly that starts to develop. And really, it doesn't even really start to latch on and develop until about 5. Mm-hmm. So even all before that, kids really have no ability to self-regulate. They need a lot of co-regulation.
Yeah, and gentleness, kindness, being with them, boundaries. Like boundaries are actually a form of helping regulate, but not boundaries where you're removing your presence. No. So when I talk about like I needed somebody to help me regulate, it would be like if I'm having big emotions, I need somebody who feels like my emotions aren't out of control, who's not scared by my emotions, who feels like they are in control of their own emotions, who can be stable and steady to help me get back to safety. That's just really hard for parents to be.
Well, and it makes sense that it's hard for parents to be.
Yeah.
And really what we're saying here
all the time.
Well, you having kids is like throwing a brick in a dryer.
That's a good analogy.
You think it's going to be awesome, and then it's just like the most chaos you've ever experienced in your life. And then you get to a point where you're feeling a little bit better, and then you get pregnant again and have another one. And then your marriage is falling apart, but you're just surviving. So you're just, treading water constantly in survival. And the sad thing about it is that on a nervous system level, and how a family is an energetic unit. Mm-hmm. So everybody in the family affects each other through their regulated or dysregulated state. So and true. Mom and dad are at the hub of it. Mm-hmm. They're the hub of the wheel, or is it the spoke? What is the thing in the middle?
Hub.
A hub.
Kids are the spokes. Parents are the hub.
Okay. Got the analogy right. I don't know much about wheels. But mom and dad are the hub of that. And so when mom and dad are in a dysregulated nervous system, everyone in the house feels it. without you saying it. Even if you're faking it, your kids are feeling your dysregulation. Now that can feel so overwhelming to parents. And we'll talk about that in a second, because you're like, oh my gosh.
I can never have an emotion again.
I can never have an emotion again because I'm going to F my kid up. Well, you know what? We all are. And that's why we're paying for their therapy bills. No, but really, there is no such thing as a perfect parent. And our kids don't need perfect parents. They need good enough parents.
Yes.
Really, the science shows and the data shows that you don't need to be a perfect parent. Kids need good enough parents. Yeah. And our kids actually need a healthy amount of stress and struggle in order to mature.
Yes.
Our job is not to make our kids' lives perfect, but to help them navigate by how we show them what through ourselves, how to overcome difficult emotions or difficult situations that happen. And so really, mom and dad become the central nervous system of the home. And when mom and dad are off, the kids are off. Even one of our favorite mentors in marriage that we've learned so much from, he says, even when you guys are in a dysregulated state, the pets are off, the appliances in your home go off. It seems like when you're dysregulated, everything starts to snowball and is affected by that energy. Yeah. He's like, it's weird, but it's true. You know?
Yeah.
And so I think as we've gone on our journey of figuring out how to regulate our home, because that really became the mission when we started to understand how dysregulated we were and how much it was affecting our kids, the mission became, how do we create regulation in our home?
Yeah.
And really, the number one place that it started was us.
Yeah.
Because
it has to start with the parents.
Yeah, because really, if we're talking about nervous system regulation and the parents being the hub and the kids being the spoke, one of the things that I began to realize early on in our journey was that our kids, in their behavior, the way that they were showing up, were actually a reflection of our own inner worlds.
Yeah, it's good.
Now, our daughter has autism, so it would have been easy for me to go, okay, well, she's just autistic. She has an even harder time regulating her emotions. She's autistic. But really what I began to see is that her autism was a gift to me because it was a reflection. It was brought to show me something about myself where I was stuck. And the issues that my son even came in, because he had a really hard time. He's a highly sensitive child. He feels things and he feels them deeply. Like when he feels excitement so much. And when he feels negative emotions, he feels them deeply. And even observing him, I began to witness that his meltdowns were reflections of our own state. And I had a parent recently that I was working with. I have a great story for this. And she was having tons of anxiety about bringing her daughter to soccer practice because her daughter had been through some trauma and was melting down a ton. And the daughter had gotten hit by a ball at soccer practice at the last practice. And so she was terrified to bring her to soccer practice because she was afraid that the daughter, who's having a hard time regulating because she's been through some trauma, would have a meltdown. And then she would end up being judged by all the parents, wouldn't know how to control her daughter.
Yeah.
So we start talking through it, and I was like, oh, okay. I identified right away. Oh, your daughter is struggling with rigid thinking, which is what happens when kids get dysregulated. A lot of times they go into rigid thinking. It's a form of control. Adults do it too. We go into rigid thinking. If things don't happen exactly how I need them to happen, then I'm not going to be okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we identified that one of the big issues that her daughter was struggling with was rigid thinking. Now, of course, she's struggling with rigid thinking. She had just been through some big trauma that she couldn't control. She was looking for ways to control her world.
Yeah.
And she starts describing to me about what her fears are and what her daughter's going to do. And I'm like, okay, so I see that that's rigid thinking. And then I was like, do you see that your daughter, in order for you to be okay in this situation, has to go to soccer practice, has to be okay, can't have a meltdown. And if she does, it's the end of the world. It's very high stakes thinking. Do you see that maybe that might be some rigid thinking
that you're having?
that you're having.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's the very thing that you're afraid of in your daughter. It's the very thing you're terrified in is the thing that you're terrified within yourself. What's going to happen if it all doesn't go according to plan?
Right.
What if she cries and I have to stop and then parents are looking at me? And so really, as for our own journey, me being able to discern that came from observing our kids and recognizing, both of us observing our kids and recognizing that their inner world were reflections of our own blocks.
Yeah.
And places that we were stuck.
That's
How
so
did
good.
you guys, like, do you remember when you started realizing that?
Well, I mean, I think, and for me, when I went through Pathways, editing it, as I started to connect to my kid,
Like, your my little kid,
the
your
me
younger
that
version
is
of
really me, the me before the world got in, and messed me up. As I started to connect to that, oftentimes it would help me if I visualized myself like Moses, right?
Our son,
because I would never want him to feel the way that I felt, right? And so as I started going on my own journey, I started connecting to what his experience must be like and what Yana's experience must be like. And so, like, for me, there are a lot of steps on this journey to getting a regulated home, but the concepts inside of Pathways are step number one, really, if you ask me, because awareness, not only for yourself, but once you get really good at awareness for yourself as a parent or even as a spouse, sometimes, this, you can read what they're triggered about before they know what they're triggered about sometimes, what's going on with them. And then you can actually help work with them, because the truth is, for any of us who have spent time going through memories in our past in counseling or consulting, right? For any of you out there who have done that, if you close your eyes in a moment when your kid is freaking out, you can connect to the fact that 25 years from now, they're going to remember this moment. And there might be a belief that they take away from this moment. There might be something that they take, and you can be the difference in what that is.
Right.
And oftentimes I think with regulation, it's like throwing with the family or in a marriage even. It's like when you throw a rock into a really still pool of water. That's like a trigger moment. That's a moment when something happens, and the dysregulation is the ripple effect afterwards. There's a state of dysregulation that happens. However, if you haven't actually gone on the journey of connecting to your own dysregulation, your own triggers, your own stuff from childhood, your kid starts acting that way. Your nervous system actually lines up with their energy.
Yep.
It's a vortex. So if they're
take you away with them.
You get sucked into their vortex of dysregulation and show up in the exact same energy. You start to mirror, they're mirroring to you that your inner world, and you mirror it back to them.
Yeah.
Of dysregulation.
Right. So
you
they
get into
pull
a bad
you
dance.
in. Yes, you do this bad dance. And really what they need, and I would argue that even in marriage or in dating, when somebody is triggered or dysregulated, or friendship, or a coworker, any situation, what they need is their little kid is needing a parent who isn't afraid of their emotions.
Yes.
Yeah. The inner kid
a regulated
inside of them
presence.
needs someone that has like that regulated presence of an adult like figure that can be like, oh no, actually I'm okay. And it actually brings the settling in. Yeah.
And that's co-regulation.
Doesn't need to unvalidate what they're saying, right? Like when your kid is screaming at you, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. If you're taking that literally,
right.
But if you rise above that emotion
and you recognize
and you see the heart of what's going
just
on,
a dysregulated
because you were that kid.
Here.
Yeah. You were that kid at one point, right? But you have to actually connect to your own stuff before you can connect to their stuff.
Well, and I'll say that the stuff that we teach in Pathways has helped me so much with other people, because when they get dysregulated, my natural state is to be like, what did I do wrong? What is wrong with me?
Yes.
Right.
Now when I see people dysregulated, I can go to compassion for them instead of feeling like it's all about me. And so I can keep my relationship circuits on a little bit better because I can recognize, like now when Justin gets triggered, instead of immediately getting defensive and getting triggered back, I can notice and I can see, because now I've learned the physical symptoms that happen, the reactions that happen. Now I know how his mind is working and functioning. And so when I see it, I can be like, okay, this is the state he's in. This is why he's seen black and white. This is why he's in rigid thinking. Okay, how do I, like, it can depersonalize it even just a little bit.
Yes.
Understanding what's going on. It's pathway to me isn't just self-awareness. It's like awareness of why people around you are behaving the way that they are. And that awareness can help you feel more powerful. And I can figure out how to navigate what I know.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it becomes an invitation to empathy, because all of that, the compassion that's being shown is rooted in an empathetic thing. Because once we understand what's going on inside of ourselves, we connect to our own story. We end up having compassion on our own story. That overflows into like, oh, I can imagine the story that's going on inside of them now that got them to this. And I can see their pain. I'm in their shoes. I'm not so offended now with whatever's going on, whether that be a friend, a spouse, a kid. It's like, this isn't some big offense thing. There's pain here, and we can get to resolve inside of this.
Now, was it a big gulp to recognize that your kids were a reflection of you?
Yeah.
Oh, it was incredibly painful.
It still is.
It's still painful.
It's
Every
an
time
ongoing journey.
Because it's not like, we've learned how to build a culture of regulation and we're learning how to maintain it, but we still have times of dysregulation. And now we're more aware of things that when we see our kids dysregulated, we're like, oh, I can see how my dysregulation right away is affecting them. Whereas before I was just in survival mode. So I'm sure I was aware of it, but I couldn't handle one more thing, or how am I going to regulate this child? And, I will say one of the things that Jonny did, and he's a big advocate for, is he studied each one of the members in our family. He studied me and how I ticked and how I worked. And I tried to study him and come back and go, okay, how is he? I don't feel like I did as good of a job as he did. That's why I say I tried. That's me being humble. I've had to learn more. I've had to get really humble to see him, and studied our kids. And was like, okay, this is what makes them tick. This is where they struggle, and he encouraged me to do the same thing. And I feel like that was a huge help in just creating awareness around it.
And can you give a practical...
before we go too far, I want to add something here. I can imagine that a lot of parents are hearing this, especially when we put a spotlight on the idea of like, hey, there's a good chance a lot of the expression that's coming out of your kids is a reflection of something going on internally. It's like, one more moment where I'm sure a parent could roll their eyes and be like, great, I'm just being blamed again for something that's happening. But that blame that you may feel if you're listening to this is actually rooted in shame. It's the, and that blame monster is going to continue to be there inside of your life if you don't address that. So as you're feeling this, like you should go like, oh, am I feeling blamed? Okay, there's probably some level of shame about this, because ownership and blame are two very different things. Ownership is just like, it is a shame-free response that says, oh, I might be the thermostat that is setting the temperature in the room. And that's really cool because like, although I can't control my kids' behavior, I can manage something inside of me that can help start settling something inside of the room. I may not be able to, again, control them inside of that, but I can really get a foot up in the situation with my kids by managing me. That feels like an empowering thing, because you're going to constantly feel this sense of powerlessness when your kids keep acting out and you keep trying to punish them or keep setting boundaries, but it's not changing anything or not really getting the results that you want. But if I can do something inside of me, man, that's a really relieving.
Well, and really when we're working with families, that's where we start. Because it's not just, you have to understand kids learn more from observed behavior than they do from taught behavior.
Yep.
So your kids are learning more from watching you interact with the world. How do you handle emotions? How do you handle conflict?
Yeah.
What do you do there? And you have to think, a baby is constantly looking to the parent from the minute that they're born to read their face. This is a biological thing that takes place in babies, where they are looking to the parent to go, I'm reading your facial expression to know, is this scary or is this safe? Kids don't stop doing that.
Right.
They do that all growing up. They're constantly looking at you going, is this scary? Is this safe? Is this scary? Is it safe? And a lot of times through our stress and our dysregulation, we're speaking to them that things are constantly scary. And so, you know, it's recognizing that the starting point is starting to recognize, what is my relationship to the world? Where is my regulation at? What's my relationship to emotions? Do I take time for my heart to process emotions, to validate how I feel, to have compassion, to work through them, to also push myself to work through them, you know, or am I powerless to them?
Yeah.
Because if I'm powerless to my own emotions, I'll be powerless to my kids' big emotions.
Right.
You know?
Well, and I think, you know,
which I think is important to say, like, parents need to be aware of blaming their kids for things that they haven't taught them yet. So if your kids are having huge emotions and you're really mad at them, but you haven't taught, like, you're not in that process with them and you don't know how to deal with emotions, you know, and just shoving emotions down is not actually a real way to deal with emotions.
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Johnny?
And I do think that both with anybody who does pathways and anybody who's just on the journey in general.
Yeah.
We all see this a lot where people can tend to be down on themselves.
Yeah.
You have to be really gracious on yourself and even recognize that one of the reasons that people avoid going on these journeys is because they don't want to feel the emotions that you're feeling while you're going on the journey of, oh my gosh, I'm messing up my kids, or look at what, you know. And so even if you can turn that into acceptance of like, hey, it's actually good. This means that I'm actually connected. This, you know, even in the moments where you want to go to shame and you want to feel like, oh, I'm the worst parent in the world. Look at how my kids are acting and it's a reflection of my own dysregulation or whatever. Take a breath and recognize that even your recognition of that is a sign that you're on a really good path.
That's a sign of healing.
Yeah.
You're going on a journey that your parents probably were never brave enough to go on.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, I was thinking, even for me, like, one of the acceptance thing that I have is my nervous system has been programmed for years to be dysregulated, and it's going to take me a while to unlearn that. And so, and I believe in redemption. Like, one of the things me and Justin say is God is a redemptive genius, but I believe that you can have a belief about redemption for your life. So me and Justin in our own marriage have done cycles of dysregulation where we have ping-ponged back and forth, creating a bad dance between being dysregulated. And I didn't think I've got to be instantly regulated, because there's no way to do that. It's just not even possible. And so the acceptance of, this is going to take me some time to learn some major concepts, but I go to a lot of compassion. I'm like, no one taught me how to be regulated as a kid. No one taught me what to do with those emotions. I didn't have that felt sense of understanding. And so I'm having to learn something that I've never learned before. And how cool, because even if you learn it when your kids are 20, 30, 40, you still get to support them.
You still affect them because you still have relationship with them. And I love that you said that, Abby, because as we lean into compassion for ourselves and our own journey, and we didn't know what we didn't know, right? We did the best. I tell parents all the time, you did the best you could with what you had at the time.
Yeah.
And so we can't judge that person because they did the absolute best they could with what they had. But as you begin to have compassion on yourself, it's cyclical, where you begin to have more compassion on your kids and their dysregulation, going, they don't know how to work through this.
Right.
So you're not coming at it out of a triggered state where you're trying to fix them. You're coming at it from a place of compassion, of love, and it's a totally different feel. And so leaning into that compassion piece as parents becomes key. We have to feel the compassion for ourselves, for our little kids inside that feel lost and overwhelmed.
Yes.
Well, yeah, because, you know, as I one of the things as I've been going on my journey is connecting to the fact that I had a really childlike heart as a kid, you know, and and this is so funny, but I wanted to write my own version of Winnie the Pooh.
Aww.
You know, I still have little booklets where I
So
had
cute.
drawn little stories
Oh my
about
gosh.
the incredible adventures of Jonathan, Daniel, and Sailor Bear is what it was called. I mean, like, that's like the kind of kid I was, you know? But that was all lost. A lot of us lose that in the hardness of life. So going through pathways and connecting to my own stuff, you know, as a dad, because I'm in the mess and I already have the kids, right? Like, I'm buried and I'm a grouch all the time, and
I have no
awful.
margin, trying to escape into your phone or
into whatever.
Yeah.
And so as I've gone on the journey and connected to who I was before everything, I've actually become a lot more childlike. You know, I enjoy doing some of these things with my kids.
Me too, actually.
You know, and that's really changed the way things are, but I would have never gotten to that point without connecting to and loving my own heart. And that's why it's really important that you start there
with kindness,
figuring out what's
yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do think, like, you know, I was watching, I'm really into Legos, for those of you who are into Legos, to an obsessive level. And so I will get up in the morning and cook the kids breakfast, and we'll watch like rumor Lego videos on YouTube.
Like Lego sets that are rumored to come out. They're speculating about potential Lego sets. There are whole channels.
This would be like Justin's
devoted to
Dream
speculation.
Yeah.
And so I'm watching this video. This is like a couple weeks ago. I'm watching this video with my kids first thing in the morning. And it's talking about all the new sets coming out this summer. And it's a really positive YouTuber guy. He doesn't use bad language.
You vetted it.
We watch him all the time. He has a really upbeat personality.
Yeah.
He's not negative. Okay. And we're sitting here watching it. And he's doing this thing that's really common in the Lego community, which is being really, really critical of anything that is like the girls-based themes or the kid-based themes, like anything that's not adult. Right. So these are sets that my kids are excited about.
Yeah.
The new Lego Friends, like girls, you know, princess set.
And Mario set.
And Mario. And in the adult Lego community, that's not like real Legos.
Yeah.
I get that over in the action figure community. We have stuff like that.
Yes, it's a very nerdy thing. We're going, this is a deep cut here, okay? Into nerd.
And I've been in this same way of thinking because, and if you ask Pietze, like, if you go back to when we got married, we were negative and criticized everything. Yeah. Like, you better not listen to Nickelback, because if you listen to Nickelback, we're gonna like, or whatever
Justin
it is.
Literally almost spit.
I always joke about. I always make a joke about loving Nickelback, and it's my favorite, and it's the best band ever. It's always my joke on here, so you didn't know that.
Oh, that's so great!
I love it.
So I'm sitting here watching this YouTube video with my kids, and I turn it off. Not because it's anything bad, but in that moment, I realized this person is conditioning my kids to be negative, to have a dysregulated spirit about things that do not matter.
Right.
It's entering, and I see this in so many of my clients and people I know who are in their 30s and 40s, who are kind of in the grinding period of life with kids, right? Where this dysregulated home that we're talking about. And they have never made peace with their own inner turmoil. And there's this criticism and negativity and everything.
The inner critic that's becoming an outer critic.
You leave church and you start talking about what you didn't like at church.
Right.
You come out of work and you process in front of your kids about all the awful things about work. Right. It's constant. You turn on the TV and there's some YouTuber telling your kids why they shouldn't be excited about the new Lego Disney princess thing because of some reason, right?
You vent about how horrible the world is and how bad politics are all the time.
Yes.
And you don't
Abby
think about
it.
That's a form of dysregulation. I know like a chunk of humans that like are stuck just obsessing over everything going wrong in the country. But that's
in politics.
It is actually a triggered state. It is actually their need to be aware of threats. that
Yes.
could affect
Yeah.
them. And so
Yes.
it feels dysregulating being around somebody who's ranting all the time about the state of the country. And I like knowing what's happening and being proactive.
Totally.
But the concept is, even now that I understand triggers, I see like, oh, there's like pain. You're scared. You
Yeah.
feel the need to be on edge. You're dysregulated over this. You feel like you need
Yeah.
someone bigger than you to tell you you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
And honestly, most of you with kids will resonate with this, but you actually see it showing up in the home, in your kids. When they open their mouth and start being critical, start
Mhm.
being negative about stuff that they shouldn't even need to be.
Yeah.
Where's that coming from? Right?
Well,
Where's
and
that
even we
spirit
noticed it
coming
in
from?
Moses, because like even when he started saying, I'm so tired.
Oh yeah.
I'm so tired.
There was this whole thing where I would never say I was upset. I would just be like, oh, I'm exhausted. Because I was.
I'm
I was
just really
exhausted from
tired.
working.
I'm tired.
So our 5-year-old at the time
When he was dysregulated,
would start doing this.
saying,
I'm
I'm
so
just exhausted. I'm tired.
And
And we were like,
I am teaching him to never be happy.
And to not know his actual emotions.
emotion.
Because that's not a real emotion.
Yeah, exactly. That's where we're like, no, we need to actually pull back and be actually communicating around this, because he was just mirroring back to us what we showed him about when you feel dysregulated. Oh, I'm just tired. And so it's those little subtle things that I think really like became such a wake up call, and where we started first. And really that becomes the foundation for creating regulation, because even, kids are bank accounts. And you
Mhm.
have to put into their bank account so that you can make withdrawals when you need to.
Yes.
It's
A
good.
lot of times we haven't put enough in to make the withdrawals
Yes,
that we need to, and
yes.
to get the behavior that we want out of them.
Right.
There's not enough input in there.
And that's where discipline becomes childhood trauma for them.
Mm.
Right.
Right.
When it's just disciplining for the sake of
And there's not enough relational connection to create safety around it.
You know,
That's part of what can lead to that
sorry.
trauma state. No, go ahead.
I can't help, this is funny, but I can't help but think of Home Alone, right? And,
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and I think of the uncle when he looks at Kevin in the beginning and he's like, look what you did, you little jerk. And it's
Yeah.
like each and every individual is pissed off at Kevin. Like, Kevin, you did this horrible thing. But you look at the chaos of the house, like everyone is in a state
Right.
of complete and utter dysregulation. The parents,
Yeah.
everything.
Yes.
It's like you're watching the kids.
That's a great analogy.
Absolutely. And it just kept popping into my head. You watch the kids have this moment of blow up between him and his, what's his brother's name?
I don't
Buzz.
know.
Buzz.
Buzz. Oh yeah. And Buzz. So they have this instant, and it's like this moment between the two of them is literally, again, a reflection of everything else. But then the blame goes shifted onto the little kid, and like,
Yes.
he's just messed up inside of it, instead of every adult in there being like, what kind of chaos have we created here that this is the
Yeah,
result
like-
of this? Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
That's such
Well,
a good analogy.
And you do have to go on your own heart journey to be able to show up differently.
Absolutely.
I was sitting down for lunch with a guy recently, and he was actually a friend of a friend. He was just like the third wheel for some reason. He was along, and he started sharing about his daughter who has huge anxiety. They have tons of dysregulation in the home. She has huge anxiety going to school, and because he doesn't fully know how to go on his own emotions, like he can't connect to himself.
Mhm.
The reaction is to kind of just try to calm her down quickly, like that. No, don't worry, you just don't feel it, don't think about it, you're fine, like
Which
like
is the
kind of
worst thing
one
you
of my
can do
one of
with
my clients
anxiety.
calls it the frozen treatment: conceal, don't feel, don't let it show. Like
Just pull an Elsa on her.
yeah.
Mhm.
But when you recognize, okay, this little kid, right, I'm gonna pause in this moment. Getting them back to safety is more important than showing them why they're wrong for not being safe,
Yeah.
right? Oftentimes that's how the Kevin McAllister moment.
Yeah.
Okay, he explodes and then he's in trouble, and nobody else is held accountable for the temperature in the home,
Yeah.
emotionally speaking.
Yeah.
Nobody's attuning. Nobody's stepping in.
And it's the
You
behavior
know?
that gets punished rather than somebody. I heard a guy say once, with kids with autism, you can't discipline them
Right.
before you help them calm down
and regulate.
It's like a drowning person. If you're drowning, you don't say, why are you drowning? How did you get out here? If you get back to shore in 5 minutes, I'll give you a cookie. Or if you get back to shore in 5 minutes, if you don't get back to shore, I'll punish you. Right.
We have to get them out.
How can I help you stop drowning?
Yeah. Right. I got to get you out of the pool first, out of the situation. Here's the hand.
Yeah.
You know,
what's interesting is like, we're talking, so much about parents to kids, but again, we had the conversation about spouses, spouse to spouse. Like we can actually choose to show up regulated internally and can completely change the temperature of a situation depending on that. And that's something that I've been on the process of learning myself, is like, can I get this stuff internally, even if it's not externally coming out, can I get it managed internally and say that, hey, this is actually a place that's really safe to help Abby settle in her own right.
Well, in our marriage, I'd say this concept of learning when we're regulated and dysregulated and learning to manage our own thing has changed our dynamic.
Yeah.
Probably the most transformation.
Yeah. It gets us out of inevitable blowups. Like, so I think most relationships have the inevitable blowups. Those may look like dead silence with each other or acting out at each other and blowing, but there's an inevitable meltdown that happens. And those have been going down so much from the point of like, especially when we realize, okay, I'm dysregulated, and it's okay. Like, we both understand that concept. And so walking away is not like this sense of disconnection. It's like, we both know that we're doing this to settle our beings. And that's we both know this is unto safety rather than unto further threat.
You've seen the difference now of when you try to solve a problem in dysregulation.
Yes.
What
Absolutely.
does it do? It doesn't solve a thing. It only is like adding gasoline to it.
Exacerbates it completely.
But when you understand, hey, if we can both get regulated, our ability to work through this, our ability to see each other, our ability to feel safe in the midst of this, our ability to create safety where there's been disconnection is infinitely easier. And it's the same thing with our kids. It's the exact same thing. Like, getting our kids regulated gets them in a teachable space. It gets them in a space where they're...
Go ahead.
Where their executive function can come back online, where they can actually learn, where they can actually receive what you're saying. And so it becomes really about, how do we maintain regulation? It becomes about understanding our own inner world and then our kids' inner world, and how, like, before I deal with my kids, I try to take a deep breath. I try to go into acceptance so that I can show up very regulated.
Do the steps from Pathways.
Yeah. That's a huge part of
on
that.
their behalf, even. What are they feeling? What are they what is,
What's
putting yourself in their shoes before you come in and lay down the law, right? Coming in your own mind in empathy, trying to connect in.
Yeah. And I'd really, go ahead, Abby.
Do you guys have some examples? Because I think we're talking about a lot of
high level
conceptual ideas. And so if you could share like an example of noticing one of your kids is dysregulated and then what you did.
Yeah. I mean, even today is a really good example. Moses asked us, we've had kind of a stressful day because we needed to record podcasts. We had a lot on our plate and a lot we had to do.
This last week was nuts.
Yeah. We had a crazy week. And Moses probably said to us twice today, are you okay?
Are you overwhelmed?
Are you overwhelmed? He said, now he's like a little.
That's our 6-year-old. Are you overwhelmed?
He's like, are you overwhelmed? So finally, at first we were like, yeah, I am feeling a little overwhelmed. We always try to like validate. Yes, I am feeling overwhelmed so that they know, yes, you are feeling something from me. And I want to validate that inside of you. I am feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And we said, but it has nothing to do with you. Well, then he asked again in the afternoon, are you guys overwhelmed? And I just paused. We paused for a second. We dropped what we were doing. We were trying to get ready and hurry to get out the door to get this podcast going, but we stopped and we attuned to him, and we were like, it probably feels really overwhelming in the house right now, huh? Yeah. And it probably feels like mommy and daddy are upset because you're feeling our overwhelm and stress, huh? Yeah. And it probably makes you feel like you've done things wrong, huh? And he's like, yes. And we're just like, that makes a lot of sense that you're feeling that way. And then we were just very honest with him. You know, Moses, this is a busy work season for us. And sometimes that can create stress where we feel overwhelmed because, you know, we've had a lot on our plate. And so you're probably feeling that, but that has nothing to do with you. And I'm so sorry. And Jonny said, Moses, thank you so much for telling us.
So good.
We appreciate that you told us so that we could actually help you understand what was going on, you know, and just created that open invitation. And then he was like, okay, I'm good.
Yeah. And that was a regulating conversation because what he got to hear is somebody's bigger than me. I have emotions. Yep. It's not about me.
They understand what's going on.
They understand what's going on. My reality is confirmed that there is something I am feeling. And then he can go be a kid again.
And that is mild dysregulation. And, you know, I won't go too far into this because I think we might actually do a deep dive into dealing with a dysregulated child. Yeah. But, you know, even when my daughter is massively dysregulated and having really big meltdowns, which can result in her screaming, stomping, hitting, kicking, you know, autistic meltdowns are a whole thing. We've really learned how to regulate and come in really regulated to where we can turn it around. And it's a handful of minutes and then she's calm again.
Can you give us a practical example?
Yeah. So just recently, she wanted to play on Jonny's phone. And I think I took it away and said,
gosh.
Yeah, she loves her screen time. And I took it away and said, I'm so sorry. You can't have the phone. And I gave her a couple options because that always gives them a good sense of control. Well, she got into really rigid thinking and couldn't handle it. I'd given her warnings, but still she was convinced that she needed the phone. And so she came outside and just started screaming. And I immediately triggered and felt my fight or flight go up. Like I need to rage and take a hold of I need to yell and take a hold of this situation. Right.
I feel powerless and out of control. How do I get this under control?
How do I shut up the kids that's screaming in my face? So I just took a deep breath, worked through my steps inside. I accepted the situation in front of me. I accept that she's dysregulated. I accept that this feels scary and overwhelming because once I've gone into acceptance, then I can have options. Then I can problem solve. So I was like, okay, her brain is stuck in rigid thinking. So I need to get her back into flexible thinking. So we've worked through outside of a dysregulated moment. One thing that we go over with our kids a ton is we've taught them about their emotions. We've taught them about when they feel an emotion, we name it for them.
Yeah. Like the little, for those of you parents out there, the Little Spot of Emotions books.
Yeah. This is
very
a great
simple
resource.
Language, but very helpful in
What are they called?
They're called A Little Spot of Emotion by Diane Alber.
Cool. And there's probably different ones. Like there's one about flexible thinking. There's one about anxiety. They're just simple children's books, but it gives some good language that when you're in a dysregulated moment, you can actually use.
Yeah. There's some stuff that I personally change for how we teach our kids, but it's the best book. I've read tons of books about kids and teaching them emotions. These are the best book that describe how they show up somatically, how they show up in your body, how they show up in your thoughts, how to work through them. She gives great problem solving. So they're a great thing to go over with your kids outside of a dysregulated state.
Just to give them the language.
Yeah. So we've gone through this. So we talked about, hey, you're struggling with rigid thinking, are you? And she knows what rigid thinking is.
It's like an oak tree.
It's like an oak tree that when the winds come, it can break. How can we take some deep breaths and become flexible like a palm tree?
Wow.
We need to come up with a backup plan. So you wanted to play the phone and mommy said the winds of change came and I said, no more phone. And what did that make you feel? And she goes, that made me feel angry and frustrated and out of control. And immediately I just validate that. Of course, it really feels sometimes frustrating when you have an idea of what you want to do and then you can't do it. I feel that way too. I immediately validated it. And, you know, she was rising in her anger still, even though I was validating. And I was like, that's okay. I understand. Like I just created a lot of calm, a lot of space around it. I let her feel it. And then I said, you know what? We might need to get this anger out of our body, huh? So we stomped. We stomped and we let our bodies have a physical release.
Mhm.
And I
Wow,
let her
that's great.
stomp because she started actually kicking me. And what she was doing is not really kicking me. She was pushing on me hard with her feet. And I know that when she's pushing on me hard with her feet, that it's actually a sensory receptor that's firing off, that she's needing to feel deep pressure in order to feel safe. It's actually her body's way. A lot of times when kids will hit or push sometimes or create pressure, they're actually trying to feel
Get
safe
it out of
within
their body.
They're trying to get emotion out of their body and to
So
feel
good.
safe
Mhm.
within their body. And so I knew she needed deep pressure. So we started like stomping. And then I actually started to create deep squeezes on her body. Like I took my hands and created deep pressure points on her body. And that actually helped her start to regulate. Then we worked through our breaths. Let's take some deep breaths. So then we had a conversation and I was like, listen,
Which I
the
just
winds
want
have
to,
changed.
before you go this, Pietze has learned sometimes physical touch with Yana really regulates her and sometimes it dysregulates her.
Yes.
So I think it's helpful to know, like sometimes that squeeze helps her body feel safe and sometimes it's overstimulating for her. So I just thought it'd be helpful for parents to understand, like you're also learning the flexible thinking around regulating with her.
Because really, I have to get myself out of that untriggered state so that I can be in a place of feeling calm, control, and in control and ready to problem solve. So I'm looking at her because I understand regulation and I understand a dysregulated body. I'm looking at her cues of where she's dysregulated and what is, because sometimes you can validate a person or a child, especially, and it regulates them. And sometimes it can start to dysregulate them more because they get stuck in their feeling.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of know, okay, I'm reading that to see that we need to start actually processing through the feeling you're getting stuck here. So I'm going to stop validating and I'm going to actually start pushing you to take some deep breaths and start working through that emotion, you know? And so I'm reading their cues while I'm doing it. But eventually what it resulted in is, you know, we created a backup plan. You can't have the phone, but what's a backup plan? And I gave her two options. You can go make a comic book, because she loves to make comic books, or you can get your piano out and start working on music. Those are two things that she loves to do. And at first she protested, but then I just kept my boundary. Nope, these are the two options. Let's take some deep breaths until you're ready to choose the two options. We're going to become flexible like a palm tree. You know?
I think
and when you tell her to take deep breaths, are you taking deep breaths with her?
Yeah, so we're doing it together. So we do 5 up, like I hold up my hand and I go up my thumb and that's our deep breath in. And then I go down my thumb and that's our deep breath out. You know, or sometimes we do where you smell a flower and blow out a bubble. I'm smelling a flower really deep and I'm blowing out bubbles. And we become playful in it. So then I actually start to bring a different element of mood and safety to regulating. It's not just this serious thing. I become very playful. One time she was having a meltdown. Yeah. A couple of weeks ago, she was having a meltdown about having to take a walk because we have to force her to exercise. She would easily stay on the couch all day on a phone. So I was like, you're going to come with me for a walk to exercise. I'm melting down. I hate the park. She said, the park is my worst nightmare. So I took that.
And turned it into a joke.
And I turned it into a joke. I said, the park is your worst nightmare? And I was like, the dandelions?
They're going to get
the fresh air? The clouds? The sunshine? And then she was laughing, Mom, no. And I was like, let's go, Yana. We have to face your worst nightmare. And I grabbed her by the hand and we ran to the park. And the whole time I was like, Yana, a dandelion, run away. And we created this whole game around her worst nightmare. And it became so fun. She brings it up all the time. Mom, do my worst nightmare. You know, but I got her regulated and we had fun. I didn't react. If I would have come up against her, if I didn't accept that she was in that place and then learn how to work with her, it would have been like hitting a brick wall and she would have just escalated more. I would have escalated more. She would have dug in more. What I actually did is I came in the opposite energy, the opposite spirit, and I pulled her into my vortex. We're going to have fun. This is going to be connecting. And it's exactly what it was.
Right. Because you're taking essentially your frequency, your regulation, because you've gone on the journey of connecting to your internal, like what's going on in you. and you've learned how to regulate yourself, you're not being pulled into her energy anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
You're now saying, okay, I can actually be the parent and you can be the kid who's freaking out, and there's safety in that because I'm your anchor, right? Like in regulation, I'm the
bringing
anchor.
you into your window of tolerance.
And I'm not going anywhere. You have somebody to attach to. You have somebody who's going to help you work through it, right? And this is where you can't, and I think Justin said this earlier, but you can't fake your way into this.
Yeah.
Like, there's not, like, you can't grit your teeth into being regulated. You actually have to be regulated because they can feel it.
Yeah.
You know, like Abby, you could feel when you were a kid, even with nothing being said, if your home was anything like mine, you can feel the air when you walk in the door.
Absolutely.
And it's dysregulating without a single word being said.
Yes.
You know, and that's where I think, you know, for those of you who listened to last week, one of the big things you can do to create a regulated home, if you're parents, or even if you're just married, any situation, even if you're not married, if you want more of a it is well, peace, regulated home, one of the best things that you can do is, number one, go on your own journey. Go take pathways, do something to connect to what is going on inside of you, but also close your eyes where you're at right now. Ask yourself how your life feels, not what the details of your life are, the components. You know, I don't have the job I want to. What is the feeling inside of my life? Does it feel safe? Do I feel secure? Do I feel connected to those around me? And if not, I want you to then take a moment and envision the life that you want. Not the details of the life, but like the 90s family comedy movie at the end where they're in a golden field of wheat and the dog comes running up and the mom and dad are happy. And
is that what you pictured?
You know, like that moment, you know, if you've read Complex PTSD by Pete Walker, in the beginning where he describes his journey in India, and there's these families in the street and the kids are crawling on the fathers and the fathers don't mind it. And the fathers love the mothers. And it's this communal. Find a vision for the regulated home that you want to have.
It's good.
Imagine your home. Imagine what it'd be like if your whole family found a way to play a video game together and it was connected and fun and good. Or if you were able to watch a movie or go on a bike ride. Get a vision for what it looks like the next time your kids are dysregulated and falling apart and how you actually want to react. Think of yourself as that kid. How would you have wanted your parent to act in that moment, right? Actually spend time getting a vision for the regulated home that you want to have, because it's going to look different in each circumstance. That's why you have to actually study your own marriage.
Secure functioning is going to look different for each marriage, each person, each family, because secure functioning is your secure functioning. But, you know, I think for us, I think something that's worth noting is that this really came at a sacrifice.
Yeah.
You know,
big sacrifice.
It was us learning how to go on our own journey. Us having to disattach from what we thought we needed to be. It was us learning how to live a life of like slowing down and rest.
You can't be as busy. You honestly, you have to slow down because you're going to need time for these conversations, and regulation actually takes time.
Yeah.
It's much harder to be regulated and to have a regulated home if you are too busy.
Yeah. And so learning how to say no to things that we thought we had to do. I need to get my kids in this. I need my house to look this certain way. Learning how to let things go in order to keep the first things in our life first.
Yes.
We have this saying that Jonny and I say together all the time, keep the first things first. What is the first priority? We can do other things as long as the first things are first.
And for us, we've made a commitment that for outside of our walks with the Lord, the first thing is that our house is regulated.
Good.
That's
number one.
One of our first things.
Beyond our business, beyond making extra money, beyond disappointing people. And we are a disappointment to everybody in our life because we don't do as much. You know, we've slowed way down. But the first thing for us is keeping the home regulated.
So good.
And we have a very clear vision of that. So
I love that. Well, I think what we'll do is we'll have the next episode, we'll have you guys just share more stories. What it is like having your kids freak out, how you notice it, what you do in your own body to regulate, how you help them regulate. Because I think the best way for people to learn is to hear it. And I also just think it's healing. You know, when I hear a story that's so different than what I experienced growing up, there's a part that can heal you and can help you learn what you needed, and then can help you connect to that love. Even if it's not like, I'm not your kid, I'm not Moses, but I'm imagining when you're sharing that story, what it would have been like to have my reality validated by my parents.
I was too.
Like that would be so huge. And so I think we'll do an episode. I think it'll be pretty healing. So come back next week to listen to it. Part 2 of having regulated relationships. Thank you guys so much for sharing. Share this episode with other families. There's nothing that I want to see more than families transformed. Yeah. So that kids can actually grow up feeling connected to safety and love. So they don't have to do what I did.
Yeah.
Although my parents loved me, but I do think this all the time. My parents loved me a lot. If they would have learned about their triggers and regulation, it would have changed my entire experience. It would have been a game
changer. You would have felt it. You would have felt their love.
Yeah. Well, we loved having you guys on. I was learning so much just listening to it. And I was, like Abby said, I was reflecting on like, what if I was Moses? What would that have been like? And letting that like just wash over me. So I love you guys.
We have a quick audio clip for you guys to listen to, and you can sign up for Pathway. It's our last course in 2023, justinandabi.com.
So I've been going through counseling for about 1.5 years, but my counselor told me, she's like, yeah, you have depression, and that's why you always feel hopeless, and just like listed off heaps of stuff. And then I did this course, but she didn't know I was doing it. And then she's like, what has changed about you? Like, you just seem so joyful and happy and like so full of life. And I was like, wow, there's actually this emotional health course I'm doing, and it's changed my entire life. And I'm so like, I don't know, I feel so present and connected to myself since I've been doing it. Yeah, a lot of my friends and family have been coming up to me like, what has like changed you? Why are you so happy all the time? And you feel like a lot of people say when they're around me, they feel so peaceful and like that they feel like connected. Crazy, because I never felt connected to myself. And it's so encouraging that other people are noticing the change in me.
I just want to piggyback on what you just said, because when we get our nervous systems regulated, when we start to feel safer, we bring safety to the people around us. And so I love, you've like created an atmosphere of love. Wow. So your therapist was like, whoa, I see a huge difference in you.
Yeah. And she said, she's like, I wouldn't say you're depressed in the slightest anymore. Yeah. It's pretty awesome. I'm so thankful for you guys.
Later, Gators. Bye now.